HD, what are we working on today? What are we talking about? It seems like you're excited about something because I see your tail wagging.
You are absolutely right, Fletch. I have been in, I would say it's fair to say, obsessive mode around a productivity tool that I recently was exposed to, and it's called the Working Genius. And so today we are going to jump headfirst into the Working Genius model. What is it? And where do each of the three of us fall within it? What might this mean for teams and just overall getting work done? There is so much to say about this. Like, we're going to cover, I don't know, like 3 to 5% in this chat. But I also think it's going to be really good exposure if you're someone who works on a team, if you're someone who does any work at all. I cannot speak more highly of the Working Genius model. So definitely tune in for this one and make it all the way to the end, because I know there's going to be a lot of really good insight that comes out of it.
It's gonna be alright.
If you can give your community permission, especially with men, it can go a long way.
And only from that place of peace can a relationship truly be reconciled.
I saw the Wow. But if I stop and create a little space, then there's that room for response. Then I can actually check in with myself.
So, to just zoom out here, what is Working Genius? And I say a productivity tool because it's about 20% personality, about 80% productivity, as it's described by those that created it. And it really was the brainchild of Pat Lencioni, who has written books such as The Five Dysfunctions of a Team and a bunch of books on team dynamics. His team over at the Table Group then took it and have made it into what it is now. And it sort of started with an initial revelation that Pat was working with a lot of teams that would have these great ideas and they would have the people that could implement them, but things just weren't getting done. And he realized there was a third phase to work, not just the ideation and implementation, but there was this middle phase that he called activation. And those three phases, within each one, there's two geniuses that help make that happen. And so the Working Genius model is really the 6 phases of work that any project have to go through from initial inception to completion of the project. And so it goes in this order, and I'll pull up a visual for any of you guys watching. Okay. All right. So the 6 types of Working Genius, and like I said, they all work one into the next. They spell out this word widget. It starts with wonder. And so wonder is really the person who derives joy and energy from contemplating why something may be that way. The people that are always asking why, and they're often a little bit in the clouds. They're deeply considering things and maybe have a unique way of seeing things from a high vantage point or perspective. Invention is someone who takes a problem and just gets so much energy from creating something from it, from brainstorming. Like, they love an empty whiteboard or a blank page in a journal. They're always coming up with ideas and they're always flowing in. From the invention, the discernment comes in. And discernment is really the person who gets joy and energy from having an idea presented to them, and they get to pick it apart and figure out and have that intuitive instinct on, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? We should go left. We should go right. And they love giving their feedback and advice. And oftentimes they can't even fully explain why they know something's going to work. They just know. From discernment, it moves into galvanizing, which is the person who derives joy and energy from rallying a team, generating that enthusiasm, and moving people ultimately to take action. Tend to be a very extroverted person, not all the time, but I'm sure you can think about someone that is a galvanizer. Enablement is the beginning of the implementation phase, and that's the person who loves to initiate support and assist in the implementation. So they're coming up and they're saying, hey, how can I help? How can I move this forward. And then tenacity, that final step, the person that derives joy and energy from that final follow through, checking it off the to-do list, bringing it all the way to completion. And so the thing about these 6 phases in the working genius model is we each have 2 working geniuses, 2 working competencies, and 2 working frustrations. And so a way to think about this that's helpful for me is imagine your working geniuses is like you have a cup of coffee and it's in a thermos that just never goes cold. Like you get joy and energy from your geniuses when you're working in them. Your competencies, it's like you pour coffee into a mug. Like over time, it's going to go cold. Yeah, you can do it, but eventually you're going to burn out with it. And then your frustrations, it's like there's small holes in the bottom of your coffee cup. Like it's going to pour out. Like if you do that thing all the time, you are going to be fairly miserable at a certain level. And so it's good to keep in mind, like we need all 6 phases of this. We all have to do all 6 phases at varying points. The idea of the model is how do we position ourselves and have a language to think about what does it mean for me to work in my genius, the things that I'm naturally gifted at and the things that give me joy.
So HD, what if I'm understanding you correctly, it's not about necessarily what people think I'm good at or what people think I'm great at. It's about the things that give me energy, the things that give me joy in the process of business. Is that correct? It's more of what's happening internally, not necessarily how you're impacting the external.
Yeah, so they talk about at the table group, no joy, no genius. Like it really is, your geniuses are the things that give you joy and energy at work, first and foremost. We often tend to be good at the things that give us joy and energy. Um, there is this natural component to it where we're just like created to do that, and we get derived joy from it. But sometimes we have been working in a competency a lot, or maybe there's a lack of a genius in our workplace, and so we're forced to work in a competency or frustration, and we've gotten good at something that actually is frustrating for us. So there's definitely cases in which we may have actually a skill set that doesn't align to our genius. And that's something that we really got to look at, because eventually, once again, I think we're going to burn out if that's the route we take. So I'm excited to just launch into this conversation. For full transparency, I brought this to these guys. I did it with another team that I work on. And it was just, I mean, at first I'm kind of like, I'm very skeptical of these things. I tend to be. And so I've done strength finders and Myers-Briggs and all these different tests. And this one I just assumed was another one just like that. And at first I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. But it really was, the more I processed it, the more I realized this is not just something that might be helpful. Like it has been transformative in the way that I think about work. And so I brought it to these guys, and we actually had a session last week. And I hope it was helpful. It felt very helpful for me. I've been just continuing to stew on it, and I'm excited to just go even deeper today, share with the listeners just some of the things that we were learning.
Dude, I just smacked a mosquito on my face.
Oh my gosh, I can actually
see that?
Jeez.
What I love, Fletch, is you hit and then drug.
I wanted to see if I got it. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry for that smack.
No, I feel like that's what we're hoping to do, is just really smack any unnecessary mosquitoes and clean up our face today.
Well, yeah, I mean, HJ, I don't want to distract from what you're saying, because you just said so much information, and I feel like it's so, what's the word? There's so much substance to the working genius. And I think what you're talking about with the language, where I found it super helpful, was, I guess, giving it language, giving some of the thoughts and emotions and feelings that I've had internally, but never been able to encapsulate. So this became something for me that brought a lot of clarity to how I was thinking about our team, and then how I was thinking about a lot of the skills that I feel like live inside of me.
Well, speaking of you, Fletch, I have your report up right now, so let's dig in.
All A's.
Let's go.
Maybe 1 B+. Just kidding. I was a C and D guy.
Yeah, but
Cats and dogs, baby.
isn't it
Cats and
like
dogs.
it's helpful for me to like so much of our schooling system is set up for the ET, like the enablement tenacity. Like that's kind of what's more culturally celebrated. And
Ah,
um
dude,
so
thanks for making me feel better.
I got you, bro. I got you. Okay,
Yeah.
this is Fletch's report here. Fletch, walk us through it. What, how has this, helped informed, or what did you take away as you read through this?
So first, if you're not able to look, I'm just going to read it out and do a little overview. So my two working geniuses are discernment and galvanizing. So naturally gifted at and derive energy and joy from using your intuition and instincts to evaluate and assess ideas or plan. That's the discernment. And then galvanizing, naturally gifted and derive energy and joy from rallying people and inspiring them to take action around ideas, projects, or tasks.
Yeah,
Those are the working geniuses. So
how does that
for
land?
me, I didn't really understand discernment until you explained it, and then I connected it with intuition, and then I was starting to understand and digest it. I'm like, yeah, I do use my intuition a lot and my instinct a lot to make decisions um, on day to day circumstances or day to day situations. Like that is just something that I think I fall back on. And I told you this, H. I'm like, that's why I think one of the reasons I love improv so much is because the discernment of just make a decision fast and stick with it. Um, and then the galvanizing thing was really fun to figure out because I think that's something that you guys have really brought out in me or maybe just helped me see within myself, which is the fact that I love to bring people together and bring them towards something most of the time. Every time I just need something to bring them to, um, or else I can't use I don't know where to galvanize them. So whether it's a project, whether it's an event, I love bringing people together and being that messenger of something that I guess galvanizes.
Yeah, I mean, Calbs, you see this in Fletch? You see that genius?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for Fletch, this was spot on. Fletch, I wanted to touch on specifically in your working frustrations, you have wonder and tenacity. And I remember when we first saw this, we all were kind of scratching our heads at first, going, "Wonder? Like Fletch has a frustration in the wonder?" Expand a little bit on what you see in that.
Dude, I was kind of pissed, honestly, when I saw that because I think of myself as someone who loves to wonder and ask why and ponder the questions. And uh, working genius consultant Henry Davis really brought to light that, uh, I can be in that stage of wonder and be in that state. And I love to be around people who are in wonder. But in terms of where I derive joy and where I'm at my best, I don't think that naturally lives inside of me. And just because I can appreciate that state and appreciate, that where that falls in the whole creation process, it doesn't mean that that is a state that really I'm at my best or functioning at my best in.
Hmm.
But I remember looking at that and being like, come on, dude.
Yeah,
Like, I'm such a dreamer.
no,
I think of it in the lens of after like sitting with it, going, "Why is Fletch's frustration wonder?" And I think what's very telling in here is that your invention is in your competency and your wonder is in your frustration. And I think that's very true. I think there's multiple times where it's like Henry and I could dive into the research of something and look into the broader picture of it. And Fletch, your mind tends to stay in the uh, capacity of more of the output of all of that wonder and research. Like your mind is not one to sit there and like say, oh, I wonder what the statistic is for this specific problem. Your mind is your state is always like, oh, that is a problem. Here's an interesting idea I could have for that. So like I don't think you fully go to the wonder stage. I think you kind of stay in the invention stage and listen to people in wonder and then go from there
Yeah.
rather than um, being the one who goes out and finds the research himself.
And I would even add, like, I mean, because your genius is the activation phase. It is the missing link of work that, like, we didn't realize for so long was such a critical part of work, discernment and galvanizing. And so I think if McKenzie and I are doing the research and like maybe even coming up with some ideas, I know inventions in my genius, like you're ready to go on it. Like before we're even like you're ready to make the video. Let's just make it. Like, why have we not made the video yet? Like, let's shoot it. Let's get this thing done. Let's make it happen. And you're in that activation place really quickly because you love that middle phase of work. How does that land?
Dude, yes, it makes a lot of sense. And sometimes I have to remind myself to slow down because of how much I love the activation stage of it all. And I think this really helped me as to how I can equip myself and be in that stage longer and just how to use it in a way that's beneficial for team, myself and team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one of the things that can happen in working genius, I know that I'm certainly guilty of this, is it works in phases, right? But if a project is no longer in the phase of my genius, I'll often try to bring it back to that phase. Or for people that are further downstream that are more in like the enablement tenacity, they want to force it down before maybe it's ready. And so we always want to work in our genius. And so we'll try to mold a project to fit our genius without even realizing we're doing it, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, I think, why I don't love tenacity so much. And I'll always try to bring it to the state of galvanizing. Like when I feel like it's in a good state, I'll be like, okay, time to galvanize.
Yeah.
Because I know that's where one of my working geniuses is.
Mm.
So yeah, my other working frustration was tenacity. So I'd wonder in tenacity. And if you guys didn't catch, I had enablement and invention in my competencies. I feel like I'm good. I'm complete. Um, in
Yeah.
terms of covering my working genius. I think H, you helped me with a lot of language and understanding with invention, um, and the competency around it. Um, and
Fletch,
I think
Fletch, go go ahead, finish your thought. Sorry,
no. It's all
I
you.
was just a little mosquito coming up and
What
hitting you on the face.
were you gonna say?
Yeah, I've got a question. What happens if you replace frustration with working fear?
I think you're unpacking a different lunchbox, like a different bag of goodies right there. And what I mean by that is, I think there's a connotation around frustration and fear, both completely different words. And when I put fear there, I think about why it is that sometimes I don't finish what I start or why I haven't done that in the past. Um, and I don't know if I'd categorize it as something that I'm scared to put out, but maybe that's like deeply embedded in there, like caring too much what people think. So you could bring it back to a fear, and the frustration could stem from the fear, which I can see why and the value behind that switcheroo.
But it feels like the fear to me is not the thing. Like it's not that you fear wonder, but more like there is a underlying fear perhaps to the frustration. I also think there is like a natural tendency towards things that we have, that
Well,
may
I,
not
I think
necessarily.
I think you're right, HD. There's an underlining fear, And where I was getting at with this is like, okay, let's say there's a working fear in something like tenacity. Could it be a fear that it's not good enough, and that's what's fueling that frustration? Or on the flip side with wonder, could it be a fear that you don't know enough to even start? And so rather than sit there and get into wonder, you kind of have a, what's it called? I'm blanking on the term, but imposter syndrome, and
Right.
feel like you can't even start on something because you feel like you need to be an expert on it before you even begin.
I don't, as someone who also is frustrated by tenacity, I don't think it's like like a perfection syndrome. Like it is quite literally like I think something is different in you and me in terms of like that, you know, that thing you wake up and you're like pumped to start checking things off the to-do list. I do not wake up like that. I wake up and I'm like, I want to, invent and brainstorm and think and like have meetings and like things like that. Right. Like it's just literally like a different wiring. It feels like to me. I think it's super interesting question to like unpack what might the fears be around the frustrations, but I don't know.
Have you looked into
And
consulting?
moving
HD?
Okay, moving on. It's a good question.
Guys, if you want to take a picture of my working genius so you can hang it up in your room, it is available on Henry's Acrobat, which I didn't know people still used Acrobat.
Dude, why are you guys sleeping on the Acrobat? I don't.
That should be one of your working geniuses, bro. You're an Acrobat.
I think so.
I don't think I've ever.
Okay, McKenzie, walk us through, man. Walk us through the your report here, and what you got from it.
Yeah, so working genius, as many of you guys know, I am a genius, so this was really easy for me. My working genius was my working geniuses were tenacity and discernment. And my working competency was wonder and invention, and my working frustration was galvanizing and enablement. And so I'm giggling because I think this is very accurate to where my current state is in my life. I think I'm very much in the state of I want to get things done. I want to get things over the finish line. I know that my mission and my meaning is right, and I know that my direction is right. And so I definitely see stuff like galvanizing and enablement almost as intuitively, like I see them as things that are holding me up in the process, not things that are helping me put things over the finish line. So that's been really interesting to explore and to see where I need to lean on other people to truly get things over the finish line the way I want them to.
Is there an example of a time you can think about working in your frustration and being annoyed by that?
Editing any Blue Marble film. I think there are times where it's like, oh gosh, I feel like I need to step into the role of kind of rallying both of you guys together into a single mission, but then we're all stuck in our discernment, and I just get frustrated in that process. And for me, it's like I don't see a lot of point into putting a lot of weight into those two. So
yeah.
Coming from a pro galvanizer, just I can teach you some things, man. I can teach you some
Fletcher's
things.
galvanizing is useless to me.
So there's always this interesting tension, I feel, because both of you, like we all have discernment, which is a whole separate beast we can talk about in the team map. Because the discerners always want the other people to trust their intuition is right. And when all three of our intuition doesn't say the same thing, that's when we've had just oodles of conflict and debates and whatever word you want to put on that. And so if we all have that genius of discernment, we all enjoy that process. Both of you are in those next phases. you're in galvanizing, and McKenzie's like ready to like, okay, let's freaking finish it. We've just discerned what we want. Good. Like he's ready to immediately jump to tenacity. Fletch is ready to galvanize it. And I'm like, are we sure this is the best idea? Like, hold the phone. Like, we may need to run back upstream real quick. Like, I start to get those tensions in my chest. That's like, wait, are we really ready to like execute and follow through on this? And so it's all of that comes up on the team. But that DT combo is really interesting because as soon as you decide your direction, like you're going to try to finish it.
Well,
Dude, you know what I just thought about?
Oh, what?
Sorry, Mackenzie. I'm going first this time. Was like the ideas that were just coming to me, or the examples, I should say, was when we were doing T-shirts for Blue Marble Sky. Mackenzie would like come up with an idea, looked great, and I'm like, okay, marketing scheme. I'm going to do a photo shoot this afternoon, and HD is like, no, we need to make sure we're getting natural, organic material. We're not hurting the earth. We really need to think about like the design. And Mackenzie's already setting up like the business, how we're going to be running everything.
The spreadsheet,
I
Excel,
was already
plugging and
integrating
plugging.
Stripe into the website. We were ready to go.
Yeah. Oh
I'm like,
gosh.
hold the phone.
Or
Yeah.
Fletch, where I see it come up is in these hurdles is we've worked on something for months. You know, I think about both of our trailers that we released for the films, and it's like ninth inning, the day we're supposed to post it and launch, and we all of a sudden find ourselves going back to the drawing board. It's like I'm coloring the video. I'm like finishing the final touches. I'm putting just a little bit of sound in there to tweak it and to do the final export. And I go and I turn to you guys. I'm like, anything else?
Scrap it.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And Fletch, I don't know if you remember, there was with the first Blue Marble trailer. We got to the day or the minute that we were about to post it, and then you wanted to split the trailer into 2 parts.
Classic.
Yeah, that was
And
one
I
of
was
the
like,
most upset I've seen McKenzie.
oh,
Fire-
you
fire
took
him.
you took my tenacity and shoved it up your assity. I mean, you just
Dude, this
Spot
is
on.
I mean, it is really true though that like there's times because I get joy and energy for what I get joy and energy from. So I assume other people get joy and energy from what I get joy and energy from. Like there's this subconscious assumption. But there is literally moments where we're just stealing joy from each other by being like, "Oh, well, you certainly wouldn't want to do that," or "Hey, let me just run it back to invention." And Mackenzie's
and
like,
then our discernment makes us fall right into our trenches.
yeah, exactly.
So playing that role of, you said it, not me, a joy stealer can be very detrimental, I think, to any project and teamwork. You know, how you guys are functioning as a team and the way in which the organization can properly carry things out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just for full context. This room I'm sitting in is an absolute mess right now because I've been trying to use my tenacity to finish setting up this studio, and it's been exhausting and frustrating to me. And I would think to not ask Madeleine, my girlfriend, to help me finish this, but like the second I ask her, she's like, "Oh my gosh, I would love to do that." Like for her and her genius, she actually has tenacity and discernment too. Like the idea of helping me finish this is so exciting to her. And to me, I'm like, why in any world would someone want to help me with this? You know, there's so many times in which we just assume like, of course that person wouldn't want to help me. But that's the beautiful thing of this model is realizing, wow, there is something that gives everyone joy, and it's not the same thing as me. And for me to not let them do that thing is stealing their joy.
HD, I feel like that was the whole reason I joined Blue Marble in the first place. You guys just were not moving on this video project, and I was like, all right, come to Chicago. Let's finish it.
Yeah, exactly.
Turned into 3 years of work.
Which we also, in no world, I think you would agree with me here, Fleet. In no world would we have been able to finish that film without McKenzie. Like we have no T, like no tenacity. And McKenzie, I mean, yes, we could work in it. We can work to try to get there. But McKenzie was the thing that came in and was like always eye on the finish line. What is necessary to finalize this thing? I mean, your line from us making the film was, it's never finished. It's just going to reach a stopping point.
Yeah.
And that was enough for you. Like that's
Yep.
what you wanted to get to. And
Get to
you
the
really did
stopping
drive
point.
us to it.
I always tell Kara, my wife, she always asks, "Are you done working?" And I hate that question. And so I always say, now she doesn't say, "Are you done working?" She says, "Have you gotten to a stopping point?"
That's good. That's good.
Well, because every time I think I'm done working, I'm like, I got to move on to the next project I have in my list. And so never done, only stopping.
Mhm. Yeah. McKenzie, I'm curious, just looking at this, like you do get some joy and energy from ideating and from wondering. But I notice with the DTs I know that there's usually like, if you know something isn't going to be able to be brought to completion, the whole thing is just like frustrating. Like if you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
actually believe it's going to be possible to like really finish it. Does that feel true?
Yeah, I think if any other step, I mean, in my view, in any other of these steps, if we get held up too long, I'm already calling that this is probably going to fail and I need to pivot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
HD, do you have any data on what the working genius would be for someone who's in like the military?
So yeah, I think it's a good question, Fletch, because the interesting thing about working genius is it doesn't really tell you what industry you might be good at. It's all about the tasks that you're executing in whatever position you're in. And so even in the military, like you would think like an implementer would be really solid as a soldier, right? That ET. But as a commander, you may want more galvanizing and invention. So I think it's way more task, like thinking about what task would that role require and how might that fit my geniuses.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep pushing and then we can go to the team map. So I'm gonna pull up mine here.
Well, I just have to say, I think looking at McKenzie's working genius in tenacity, I have a way better understanding for why McKenzie is always wanting a project or wanting something to go, and why he's such a stickler for that thing crossing the finish line and getting it to the point it needs to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just gives me so much more insight into who he is as a person, right? And I think when you can have that on a team, there's not just the saying of empathy or understanding, there actually is the thing of understanding, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what does that feel like, McKenzie, to get joy and energy from checking it off? Because I mean, it's incredibly valuable to this team. We know that, but I'm just honestly curious, what does that feel like to you?
Good. I don't I don't know. I
like
I think-
turtles.
I mean, I'm like describing what is it like to be you? Just tell me, like, no,
yeah,
but like,
great.
like
I don't know.
you just for in your head, it's just like, okay, like I just get it done, just do it.
Well, it's more of just like I'm astonished that more people can't get things done. And so every time I finish something and someone's like, "Man, that was what a great final piece, what a great final product." I'm like, "That's why you do it, is to finish it. You don't like you don't do it to just linger in the process for forever. You know, it's
For
like
sure.
you got to have a stopping point." So it's hard to, I don't know. I feel like it should be an expectation and not something that I praise. It's just like we follow through because that's the point.
For sure. And the difference, and you're right, like all of us have to follow through and finish, but the difference is like to derive joy and energy from that, like for that to be a natural thing. Yeah.
Well, yes, we derive or we finish because that's the point. But I think HD, also known as Wonder Boy over here would say otherwise.
It's true. Let's check it out.
HD's in the clouds and I'm in the dirt.
And we need them all. Although I'm not fully in the clouds.
Where does that make me? Off in the fields somewhere?
You're with the people.
Good.
No, the true in the clouds would be the GI, genius. But as you see here, my genius is ID, which is invention and discernment, competency in galvanizing and wonder, and frustration and enablement and tenacity. And I think the immediate thing I felt like in you, how you were frustrated by wonder, Fletch, like, and you were like, that's annoying that they would say that I'm frustrated by wonder. That's not true. I felt that with enablement because there was this sense I got of like, what are you saying? I don't like to help people? Like, what the heck is that? And no, that's not what it's saying, but it is saying that like I'm not gonna be the one that's like poking you, following up, like kind of by your right hand as you're trying to finish. That's something that if I have to do too much is going to be frustrating to me. And obviously that tenacity. So that implementation phase is a frustration. Hence why I have a 1988 bus sitting in the IND phase.
It's been in the eye for a decade now.
Exhausted by the galvanizing. And
when did you guys buy that? 2015, 2016?
No, 2018.
Oh, wow. My timeline on when Blue Marble started is way off.
2017 would have been the start. Yeah. No, 2016 actually would have been the start of Blue Marble, which is crazy. 8 years that we've been wondering and inventing. It's beautiful. Because now I feel like we're so much closer to what actually would be our geniuses. To be able to talk about this kind of stuff is the stuff that lights me up. And I know
Blue Marble sat in the IND for 8 years.
Oh, not entirely true, but yeah, there's been a lot of IND. And that's, I think, and the IND for me, it's like, I know that, I mean, it's these kind of conversations, right? Like learning a framework like this, but also the idea of like creating frameworks and programs. And I think it shows up different for different people, but just, I love whiteboards. I love big, pages and the ability to just like allow those things to flow through. I think the frustration sometimes for me as an IND, like with the people I work with, is I can definitely interrupt. It's invention is a very disruptive genius because I'm always coming up with ideas. And a lot of times I'm coming up with ideas past the point at which I should be coming up with ideas. And that's the frustrating thing for people that are more downstream or in implementation phase is I'm like constantly trying to bring it back. Like, ooh, but I have another idea, or try this out, or what do you think about this? And, I need people like McKenzie who can say, hey, it's not that that's not a good idea. Sometimes it is a good idea. Sometimes it's not. Other times it's just not the right timing for this idea. Let's put this on the shelf, as you like to say to me. Let's put this on the shelf and we'll come back to it. And I think
big shelf.
It's a big shelf. Exactly.
It's a big shelf.
Like, I don't know. How does this all land with you guys? Any thoughts? Y'all are the ones that work with me.
I immediately saw your working competency or galvanizing makes sense for me in your working competency. I see that as something that you're really good at, but not necessarily one to want to do it or get energy or joy from doing it. You can, and that's how I understand the competency, and you can do it well. But in terms of giving you energy and being in that. Another way HD, I'm thinking about like working genius, and this is maybe just a synonym to genius, is how people describe flow sometimes, which is being in that state. I think flow might lean a little bit more towards getting lost in something and you're so entranced with that activity. But before you enter that flow state, it feels almost very natural to you. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how I've been thinking
Yeah.
about the working genius in action. Is
Yeah.
like you're not really thinking too much. You're just entering a state that feels very right for you, right?
Hmm.
Um, which means you don't have to put a lot of thought power towards it. It just is naturally something that bubbles up inside you and gets you going. Um, your working genius of invention did surprise me a little bit. And then once again, you kind of talked me through it and shed some different facts my way or yeah, just talked more about the invention and it made a lot more sense. But the fact that
I
we
think where this
all have discernment.
Something. Calbs, did you? I was curious to know if you maybe selfishly would agree with Fletch that surprised you, the
no.
invention.
No. That's it, I was no. I was expecting that. I think I think where I see this difference in you and I, HD, the most is how either of us read books. Like I'll flip through a book that you've been reading, and I'll notice that like a lot of notes towards the beginning, a lot of ideas are written in the book, and then with me, it's more of just like I'm reading this book to finish it. I want to see the whole picture, and I want to have like all of my books. I try to finish. I don't try to buy a book that I read halfway through and don't finish it. And so I think you're very content with like jumping to a random chapter in a book and like consuming the idea and ideating on that idea. Whereas I'm very much like, no, let's see the whole framework this author's written out and see how to apply it in a certain situation. And so I see that come up when we're talking about the books we're reading and like the things we got from them. Um, and I don't know. I'm not surprised by the invention at all.
Yeah, it does make sense. I definitely have started many books that I haven't finished, and it doesn't really bother me, or just bounce around. Like all these
Oh,
books on my shelf behind me. I'm like,
if I see a
I'll get to them.
bookmark halfway through a book, I'm like, shit, come on, open it. let's let's finish this sucker.
Yeah, that's a good example. Um,
HD, was there anything that really surprised you in this?
I think it took me a second to get the difference between wonder and invention. Um, but I think that makes sense. Like I will wonder, but while I'm wondering, I'm like, really, if I don't see that it's going to like lead to a period of invention, of pondering ideas and solutions, like I'm not going to wonder for super long. Like even thinking about like researching data, like I would do that for the sake of invention. Like I'm wondering for invention's sake, or even like contemplating the things above. Like uh, sometimes if it's just like we're like just learning about ethereal ideas of God, if I'm not seeing some way that I could use those ideas to invent something in the world or create that in the world in a way that feels like it's going to be helpful or practical or like in some way move things forward, it's like I eventually will just get bored.
Do you
So
think that's your discernment right there? Like talking to that invention?
so it is interesting when we have like you have this as well, Fletch, but like to have back-to-back pairings, like a lot of times I'm inventing and discerning at the same time. And um, one thing that happens with IDs is I will throw like I'm inventing, you guys are discerning. Like I'll throw out an idea almost like very confidently. And you'll hear it like he wants to do this thing. Like he wants to go and this is like what he's asking or like saying we should be doing. And it's not at all like I'm just inventing. I'm not discerning yet. And so there is like it's been so helpful for me to distinguish because sometimes those do happen in parallel. Are you inventing? Are you discerning? Sometimes it's hard to discern my own ideas like in the moment, but that is sort of the genius of it too. Of like I can pretty quickly go from here's an idea to like will this idea work? Not saying I'm always right on that by any means, but that that's why a lot of times IDs are writers, for instance. Um, and they really enjoy that and are able to like, and still are going to need to pass that to another discerner to say, okay, what am I missing here? Like, how would you discern this? And that being super valuable as well. The galvanizing piece made a lot of sense to me too, Fletch. Like, it was kind of freeing in a way. Like, I think sometimes I've wanted to think it's a genius, but the truth is I just don't get energy from it. This has forced me to reflect on like organizing a community event last year, a year and a half ago, when I put on this big community block party, and the things I loved about it, inventing around like, what could this be, like creating the vision for it. I loved, and then discerning what would work, what would be practical, what we could actually do with what we had. And then when it came time to like rally the artists and inspire people to want to show up and do the PR for it, like by the time that I actually got to that final follow through, I was so exhausted. I like barely could have any fun.
That's when the fun begins for me.
Yeah, right.
No, the fun really begins when I start to reach out to people. Like, for instance, I'm going to this dance party on Friday. Every single person who I've had like any sort of contact with in the past 2 weeks knows that there's a dance party happening on Friday. I'm just
Let's
like,
go.
galvanize.
I didn't know that. I would have considered making my move down, but
So, Henry, before we run out of time, how does this all work as a group together?
So I'm going to throw this up. I know this is where it really gets fun, is if you get to do this with a team, which if you want to do this with a team, reach out to us. We would love to help walk you through this. Or check out the table groups work, because really their podcasts on Working Genius, we'll make sure we link it all in the description, but they just do such a great job. And I'm really inspired by the work they're doing over there. Okay, so this team map, this is for us as a team. This is kind of where we end up looking in terms of our geniuses and our frustrations. And the team map is great because it helps us start to identify where we might be lacking a genius, or where we may be extra genius, or perhaps too genius.
Yeah.
But at the same, it's not surprising given who each of us are individually, and that all of us have discernment. But obviously we talked a little bit about this. This can mean that, we're going to debate a lot. We're going to get frustrated by the fact that we don't feel like the other two people are trusting our intuition at times. I think that's shown up a lot in films, and we all have very strong opinions because we all are very confident that we're right. Does that feel true to y'all?
Yep. Yep.
And Mackenzie's like, yeah, because I am right.
Well,
that's what
Mackenzie
I heard.
brought up a very interesting thing though with the team map, is it doesn't show competencies, which I'm not exactly sure why. I like the chart because it has like the green light, red light. Maybe, yeah, I'm checking through my red light glasses if that still shows up red. Yes. The green light, red light T chart, which I think is really helpful when you're looking at like a full team dynamic. I really feel like when I look at this, I scratch my head, obviously at discernment, three amigos, all in the working genius of discernment, and then enablement, because that looks like a hole in the boat.
Yeah.
I find HD to capitalize on your point you mentioned before, Fletch shared. I manage a bunch of counselors who are in their early 20s during the summer, and I've ultimately created the stance where I say, don't come to me with a problem. Come to me when you think you have a solution. Because I'll take my tenacity and discernment and just follow through on that solution with you. But I am not in the stage where I want to sit there and sit in wonder and invention about the problem and like what could be the solution. It's like I want to just hear the solution and move forward.
Or enablement, which is like, hey, I want to come alongside you and like hold hands and help you get this done, right? Like not like I don't mean to downplay it because it's actually an incredible genius that I am very often envious of when I see people with it. But that's not going to be you either. Like if you have to hold every counselor's hand and like be right there checking in on them all the time, like that's going to be frustrating to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's something that we identified as a lack on our team, like something we don't have a lot of. Fletch is the only one who has it in his competency. It's a frustration for McKenzie and I. Enablement is interesting because it really is the thing that creates this sense of team. And without enablement, it can often feel like you're working in isolated silos. And I know we've talked about that in various points where we're like, okay, you do this, great. Like, and we break up and it's almost like we're just three people that are working on something all very separately. And so that enablement, Fletch ends up having, because he is competent and we're frustrated, he ends up having to play the enablement role more often than not. And I know that I can imagine Fletch is frustrating over time. And it's helpful to realize that is not a genius for you. Like that is something you do because you can and you will. But over time, like that's going to be something that does become exhausting.
Yeah, I think looking at this widget per se and putting language around it really took a big burden off my back. To know that I could put down enablement and not feel as, that is a weight that weighs on me, and try to, eventually find someone who has a working genius in enablement, because I think that would really put this team map into a more balanced, well-oiled running system.
Yeah. And so the question is often asked, okay, so we're missing something on our team. Like, do we have to hire someone? And that's definitely one way to handle it. I think this is really a tool of awareness for things like we just mentioned, which is, okay, we don't have anyone, but Fletch is competent. So we're asking him to work outside of his genius. Just being aware of what that means and that that's something you're asking of him. We don't have the genius of wonder. Like McKenzie and I both have it in our competencies, right? Like there may be times in which I'm being asked to wonder and that becomes frustrating over time, right? Like to just be aware of what we're asking each other to do. And in a perfect world, no world's perfect, but we're living in our genius at least 80% of the time at work and the other 20% in our frustrations and competencies. And if we can start to do that, I really believe we're going to, just the way we show up to work will feel different. The way we appreciate the people we work with will be different. And ultimately we'll get so much more done.
Yeah.
So HD, let's start to put a bow on this puppy and lead people into where they can go through this by themselves or with their team. I know you said something about the show notes. And guys, if you're listening to this, that's completely fine. But I think this episode in particular would be very helpful to watch, just so you can at least pause it and see what some of these actually mean and follow us on some of the visual references. But HD, can you just lead people into where they can go to find all this and do it
For sure.
themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a couple resources I'll leave you guys with. One, go take the test. Just Google Working Genius. You can find it through the Table Group's website. We'll link it in the show notes. Just go take it. It's $25. Like it's a really good use of money. And then once you've taken it, chances are you're going to want the people around you to take it. You're going to want your team to take it. And there's tons of resources through the Table Group to do that. If you are interested in having someone guide that process, I'm low key raising my hand. I would love to do it. So reach out to us and we'd love to talk to you about it. Obviously this is something that really is lighting me up right now and something I'd love to keep sharing if that's interesting to you guys. Otherwise we'll link everything below. Go listen to their podcast, read Pat Lencioni's book, The Working Genius. It's really cool how he writes. It's all fiction. But with this obviously like nonfiction concepts. So just so much good stuff to explore. And I know we just scratched the surface, but really appreciate the chat, fellas.
Let's get it done.
Let's go. Let's go back to invention.
No, we need to go tell the people. Calbs, any final words, any thoughts for the people?
Let's just get it over the finish line, guys. Let's just get this podcast done.
Incredible. You see that? Dude, you know what? Okay, I actually have one final thought that I'm going to leave you guys with and the listener, which is I feel like this would be a really cool concept to almost make like a Pixar movie with, Inside Out version, and how like all of these showed up in like the workplace. I think it could be hilarious. Like tenacity.
We were talking about that I was talking about someone about that Inside Out this morning, like the moment in Inside Out where I guess like someone's really upset and Joy is like trying to hype him up and be like trying to use optimism and positivity, and then sadness comes up and goes, that is really hard or something. And that is like exactly what they needed to hear. Oh my gosh, it gets me every time.
So good.
So good.
good.
All right, fellas.
All right. Peace.
Peace. Hey guys, thanks for getting to the end with us. We really appreciate y'all being here. Make sure wherever you're listening to this to go rate it and share it with a friend. It really helps get the word out there about this podcast. And there's one more thing that I really want to share with you guys. Beyond the Beat, which is a film we've been working on for the last several years, is officially live on Amazon. This is a big deal for us, and we really would love to hear what you guys think about it. So go and watch Beyond the Beat. It's this story about these three amazing friends who started a creative arts festival in the wake of a 2-decade civil war in northern Uganda. The film explores the potential and the power of art and creativity to inspire communities and really to bring healing in our lives and in communities all around the world. We think there's a ton of value in it, and we had a blast making it. So please go check it out and let us know what you think, and we'll see you next week. Peace, y'all.